Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is another edition of the Envision Speaker Series. I have three incredible people on the call with me today. I've got Sarah, who doesn't have a last name. No, Sarah, your last name is
Sarah Cotterill.
Cotterill. Okay, I always want to get names right. I have not yet gotten your name right, but I appreciate that. On the bottom is Carrie Allen. And Carrie, I am following you on LinkedIn because you do some really incredible meditative stuff on Mondays. And I want to share that with the people, our audience. And Marlene Muir, hi, how are the three of you doing today?
Fabulous.
That was a real question, and that's okay. I typically start off these conversations by uh, giving you the opportunity to share your value and what you want to get out of this conversation. I want to do that, but I also want to add a twist to that, only because Carrie shared something in our planning session that really kind of inspired me to do something new. She uh, indicated that when you introduce yourself, don't use a title, use something more innately you, who you are, who's your person. So if you can kind of add that to your hello statement to our audience, I would really appreciate it. I don't care who goes first. Somebody's got to go first, though.
Right. I'll take the bait and I'll go first. So hi everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Keith, for having us. I'm Carrie Allen, and I am a paradigm shifting community visionary, is what I have landed on as how I describe myself. Thank you so much for taking that inspiration. It's something that I'm continuously working through. How do I describe who I am innately and intrinsically? And I'm excited to be a part of this, to talk a little bit about how we have the opportunity to shift our world and how we interact with each other. And these beautiful ladies that join us here today are a huge part of my inspiration as well as my motivation to do that. So I'm excited to hear what they have to offer always, and build on that conversation.
Excellent. Welcome to the call.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Cotterill. It is nice to be here. I love this conversation of shifting away from what is on our CV and the ways that we have always defined ourselves. So today, I would say that I am an eternal optimist. I am a cheerleader of our innate abilities and talents. And I am a champion of building new living systems in our world. And I'm excited today to talk about all of those different pieces, to talk about our own human body as the highest form of technology and how that then fits into the greater world that we live in.
I love it. And I loved the way you introduced yourself. That was beautiful. Marlene?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Keith, for having us. Marlene Muir, and I am a loving witness and a space holder for people to realize their most optimal expression in their life.
Wow. I
Yes,
love
you
it.
are.
So these conversations are intended to be a journey. We want to take our audience somewhere very specific. And today's conversation, we really want to dive deep in what it means to build community, to have community, to be a part of a community. And it all starts with you, Marlene. So you did something rather dramatic and not too long ago, quite honestly. 3 years is not a long time to build something awesome. So I need you to introduce that idea to us, its evolution, and where it sits now, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have been the builder of an international online community that centers around the 8 points of intrinsic health. And it's the journey of intrinsic health, and it features the protocols and the work of Zach Bush, MD. The interesting thing is the whole purpose of this work, though, Keith, is to invite people to go on a journey to go inside, stop looking outside of themselves for the answer, stop looking to the experts to tell them what to do, because let's face it, no one likes to be told what to do. So how can we go inside with all the information that we're given to say, what does my body want and need in this moment? What does my soul need in this moment? What does my heart need in this moment? Who am I and what is mine to do? And so we all come into the community to pursue that essential optimal question, right? What we've also learned is that a course is a course. It comes kind of like Mr. Ed, right? A horse is a horse. But a course is about education and about learning, which is, the optimal. Here, I'm going to give you some information. You're going to take it in and you're going to apply it in your life. You're welcome. And we know sometimes that happens. And we know, especially in the realms of health, well-being, and especially behavior change, it doesn't happen. Then we have the, here's your information, I take it in, and because I'm being directed to go in with that and I literally embody it, then I have an epiphany. That's part 2. But here's where the magic happens, Keith. When I learn something, when I go inside and embody it, I have an epiphany. When I then get to articulate that and I share my knowing, my clarity, my aha, my need for support, my struggle with whatever it is that I'm working to embody, that is where the transformation happens. And that is what we're really going for. How are we transforming humanity, one person at a time, intrinsically remembering that we are a miracle, we are health, and we are knowingness and love?
So I've got to ask the first question. How did this become your reality? Like, what was the pivot point in every person I've talked with? There's a moment of, I don't like my life where it is. For many, that was COVID. For some, it was before, but COVID facilitated change. What was that pivot moment in your life that said, I need to do something different? Or were you always this person who was seeking after this and you finally found it?
Well, I've been a seeker my whole life, but I think what shifted for me over the course of different iterations, I've always been in the health, education, and wellness space my whole career. And I'm also a professional life coach. So I've been coaching for 24 years, really working very deeply with people in the belief realm and how it shows up in my life, right? So I didn't want to continue to follow that old paradigm of here's your information, take it in, change your life, you're welcome, because we know it doesn't work. What I wanted was knowing that we don't heal in isolation, and that's the second part of this, kind of giving a spoiler alert there, that we need each other to be witnesses for one another in order for that reflection to happen, in order for that transformation to really happen. And so that kind of deeper connection was something that I was personally seeking in my career expression. And then I heard Zach Bush speak. And I said out loud, I need to work with that man, went immediately to my computer and shot off a passionate cover letter.
Cool. Yeah. From that came 8 points of intrinsic health.
Yeah, the 8 points of intrinsic health were actually created before I came on the scene, but I was at the beginning of creating the container for the community. When we launched the course and community, that's when I entered. But the actual course and the 8 points and everything were created before I came on the scene.
So really quickly, what does that encompass, the 8 points?
Well, the first part is the point is be. Who are you, really? Like we introduced ourselves, who are you beyond your roles, your labels? The second is flow. You can literally in a hydration state, we are water vessels. So flow, how's my life flowing? How's my energy flowing? The third is fuel. It's pretty obvious. How am I feeding myself? And what am I fueling myself with? Am I fueling myself with optimism and love and positivity? Or is my literal diet socially, energetically, computerally ingesting toxicity all day long?
Wow.
4 is breathe. How am I breathing? The earth breathes, we breathe. 5 is move. How am I moving in my life with my body? The sixth is rest. It encompasses sleep, and it also encompasses resting the organs in the digestive system. The seventh is play. As adults, we don't play. We stopped playing a long time ago, and therefore we lose our joy, and we can't do that. So the invitation again to remember what it is to play in our life, and optimally, to play in our work with each other, to work, play in the world. And the most important is 8, connect.
I was at play. So,
Well, play and connect kind of go hand in hand, and it all folds in with B. So that's why it's kind of sequential, but it all is beautiful.
and more conversations, I'm hearing people reconnect with adults, reconnect with the idea of play. It's we, we pull ourselves from that from I don't even know what age. And so it's really sad. The key here you constantly go back to is this idea of we don't do this alone. And you specifically said we don't heal alone. So that's a unique perspective. I would like to get from the other two ladies the idea of what does that mean? What is that idea of community? Why is that so important? Carrie, take yourself off mute. It's okay.
There I am. Yeah, healing in community, I think, is a somewhat new revelation for me. Thinking that I could do all the things, I could figure out how to drink water better, I could heal my body this way, that way, etc. And the big aha for me around healing in community and needing others is actually needing. Meaning it's okay for me to have needs and for others to offer those solutions to me and for me to receive them. And I think that is where the actual healing in community starts to come in my perspective, is allowing yourself to have needs and that you aren't the only one that has to serve to solve those needs. And I think that profound shift allows us to actually heal holistically, because until then, we're trying to carry the whole burden ourselves, and that's not truly who we're meant to be as human beings.
In our pre-call, in our talk before this, you use words very clearly and very specifically, and you used a concept that I've not heard anybody say before, an ancient truth. So that's a new idea to me, specifically around the idea of community.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what the ancient truth of community really means?
Yeah. I mean, it flows directly from that concept of healing in community. When I think of why we need to better understand that we need to heal in community, it's because we've lost that innate ability to be in community. That is our ancient truth. We are beings that need to belong. It is how we have survived until this point. And I say this point because we have stepped away from that for a couple of centuries now to continue to push ourselves into what I consider communities of isolation, which is I can heal myself. I can get all the information. I can buy all the products. I can hire all the people. I can heal myself. When the truth of the matter is, the reason we weren't unwell before, or we didn't have dis-ease before, because we had this fabric of society or community in which we were held. I didn't have to fill in the gaps of all these people and roles in the community to be able to live. It was part of how we lived. Somebody was tending to the garden. Somebody was cooking the food. Somebody was watching the children in the morning. Somebody else was watching them in the evening, right? Somebody's the storyteller. Somebody's the person who's playing. The other person is the person who's teaching us how to breathe. Then there's the person who's actually carrying the babies, right? There's all these different roles that happened in our ancient lives that we've stepped away from. And in this new paradigm we live in now that we hope to shift out of, we've filled those gaps by requiring that we have the financial ability to actually meet those needs ourselves without bringing in the community to do that. And so this healing in community is the first step to remembering this ancient truth that we have, that in community we are healthy, but it has to be true, authentic community. And the way we perceive community today is not this ancient truth that does exist for us, but we can remember it. It's right there for us to access. And I really hope that we can start to shift that paradigm so we can live in the ancient future.
Well, that's another unique word, an ancient future. So we need to dive deeper into that, but maybe not in this conversation. You were just opening up a whole plethora of questions that just need to be answered. And maybe I need to be part of this this journey that Marlene had talked about earlier, to kind
Yes.
of step into who I am, and then once again learn how to play too and be healthy.
That is the greatest compliment, to say that it opened up questions for you, because that's the goal. So thank you for that.
In part of that, I was hoping you would step into what it meant to be healthy and how communities help people to be healthy, and to be whole. Is there a link to that somehow? You said that everybody has their roles and they play and we interchange with each other, but surely that has to feel good too. Yeah.
Yeah, to truly be held and to receive, not just give constantly, to feel that you can have needs, you can use your voice without retribution, is, I think, an experience very few of us on the planet right now actually have. And if we do have it, it's in nanoseconds
Mm.
or very specific situations. But when you experience it, it propels you forward. And as part of the journey of intrinsic health, I think that that is a space in which it gives you a glimpse into what's possible. And as soon as you see what's possible, you can't help but move towards it. It's how we have to be.
So I have to ask you, you went through the 8 steps.
Yes.
Of those 8 steps, what did you find most valuable for you? Like, what was that?
Um,
I got it.
I think there's two things that I would say was most important. One, play was really important to me to come back to. Actually, my most authentic self was when I danced as a child, and I don't dance anymore. And why don't I dance? And the connection of that creativity and play for me was when I felt I could be the most me.
Hmm.
And in going through that and experiencing that, it ultimately led me to my I am statement that I enjoy the most, which is not the one I shared in the beginning, but is also a part of me, which is I am a mushroom. And the reason I say that is because what I learned and what I continue to learn and love, and I've always loved mushrooms, is the mycelium network. It's the connector, it's the fiber optics, it's the communication. It isn't necessarily doing the work, but it's creating the flow underneath everything. And for me, that's a role I really want to play in this world, is facilitating that connection. So that's what I got the most out of. I mean, many other things, but
Of course, of course. And so we're going to come back to that because it's going to tie into a story that Marlene's going to tell in a little bit. But before I jump into Sarah, I'm going to ask her to get herself off of mute and join the conversation, please. So my first question to you, Sarah, is of those 8 points, what was the most impactful for you?
I think for me, it was connect. Because like Carrie's saying, we can do all of these things. We can have all of these kind of health goals and objectives. And being well is certainly a power move, but that doesn't happen. I mean, it happens to some degree, but the quantum leap happens in community. And it's not just being in community, it's the connection piece, it's the belonging. And so the community that Marlene has created is not just an online community where you show up and go like, I'm here and I'm listening in and whatever. You are connected, you belong. And that's whether you show up at every call or every opportunity or every time you want to type something in, or you show up once. That community is there to wrap their arms around you and welcome you, and you know that you belong. And so for me, that's when all of these other things in my emotional health, energetic health, spiritual health, physical health all started to click. And I met Marlene. We become great friends. I've met Carrie. We become business partners. Like there's so much cool potential that is spinning out of those connection points.
So that kind of just begs the question here. There's lots of communities in the world, and at this point in time, as professionals, they're typically called networking groups in some way, form, or another. Hey, join my networking group. We've got a networking group for this. We've got a networking group for that. And they can be considered, air quotes, community. But I think you're tapping into something a bit deeper and a bit more meaningful than what I am explaining. And so can you kind of dig a little bit deeper? Because you're also a business expert in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I might be a lawyer by training, but don't tell anybody. So I have worked in the healthcare world for a long time. So when I say I am creating a new version of the health and wellness system, that's honestly what I think we're doing. And I wouldn't say this is something that, is totally new. It's just been forgotten. So what we're basically remembering that the health of the whole is dependent upon the health of all of those. I don't even like to call them parts, but the parts that are within them. So if we as individual humans are not healthy, our community, whether that is the community of the physical cells of your body, whether that's the community of your family, your business, your neighborhood, will not be well. At the same time, it's that duality. We can't get to that optimal wellness unless we engage, unless we belong, unless we show up. And so we are doing it differently. There's a lot of talk out there about people no longer wanting wellness in work, and they want or they don't want work-life balance, they want wellness. Well, what does that mean? It goes back to what Carrie and Marlene were talking about. They want flow in their lives, right? They want flow of all those different pieces. And I always say there is no balance, there's only balancing. So we're never going to be perfect, right? And it's like we're that weighted punching dummy or whatever that comes back. Sometimes we fall over too far. And if we've got our community people there, they'll pop us back, right? And then sometimes we can right ourselves, but not always. I was a springboard and platform diver all through college. And it's really interesting because that is a sport where you do look inward a lot, and you're spinning through the air and you're flying around. I kind of feel like it's how we go through life. We're spinning and flying, and hopefully we land okay, and no splash, and it's all good. But we don't really know what we look like in the air until we either watch it on video, or even better, we have our coach say, you thought your legs were perfectly pointed and together. Guess what? They were splayed all over the place. And you're like, oh, they were? And so with that feedback, you start to go like, oh, next time I can feel that. Okay, I've got it. And so we improve in that way.
All of you are talking about, or we're getting to the idea that we need to take a real deep look into ourselves. And Carrie's already pointed to it. Sarah, you just pointed to it. When you're given the right words to reflect upon from our community, from people who have a vested interest in our well-being, we can kind of make the changes that need to be made in our lives for our personal self, but then for others around us. I remember a conversation that I had with Marlene, and she was talking to us about this elderly gentleman who, as a result of walking through the 8 steps, these 8 points of intrinsic health, finally found himself and finally learned to love himself. Marlene, can you talk about that a bit? Because I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the essence of where we're getting to is many of us are kind of lost in our titles and our responsibilities and our burdens and our stress that we've lost ourselves. And until we refine that, we define it and find it again, we're not really going to reach the point that all of the three of you are talking about because it's got to start here. Tell me about that story again.
Yeah. So this was a 82-year-old gentleman who had been a very high performing career man his whole life, family man, did everything he was supposed to do, provided well, did well, towed the mark. And he found himself health challenged, and he didn't want to be infirmed. So he tried a bunch of things and found the journey of intrinsic health, thinking, of course, he was going to come and learn all the things that he had to do, which he did. He came to a support group and broke down in tears. And he said, when I went through the very first module of B, and the question was, who are you? And the concept was really about self-love. If we cannot know who we are as the mirror and experience ourselves as the loving miracle that we are, if we don't know what it is to love ourselves, we can't love anything. And he said, I realized that I had been just such a robot in my life performing. I was doing all these things, but it was all just bouncing off of me because I didn't receive anything because I didn't know what love was. But now that I have accepted that I love myself and that I'm a miracle, my whole life has changed. All my biomarkers changed. He's 82. He said everything shifted because I just realized what it was to love myself. And this is crying publicly, an 82-year-old man. So it was a beautiful, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, assure you.
Well, then talk to me. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, can I just say, like, sometimes I think this idea of finding yourself is so daunting, right? Like, you listen to this, you're like, that's great, but I'm going to read that question and I have no freaking clue who I am. And that's what I love about the work Carrie and I are doing, the work Marlene's doing, the journey of intrinsic health is from a, kind of lawyer hospital, the way you look at things from a root cause analysis. What is going to impact you is going to be different than what's going to impact me. And so through the 8 points in the journey, it may be that I need to hydrate myself better. And all of a sudden, when I start to bump up my hydration level, my brain functions better. I start to just intrinsically know myself better. And then guess what happens? Then I come back around to that question of B, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel quite so scary. And then I start to move my body. And then I come back around to that. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I might be able to start to answer that. And so it is that spiral and the journey and the approach and these kind of simple, not always easy, but really pretty simple things bring you back to knowing yourself and that B question more and more.
And I'm glad because I didn't even have to ask the question. You actually asked the question or answered the question I was thinking is because we have to figure it out. We have to find a way. And more importantly, Sarah, what you just said, we have to become comfortable with that. And the journey itself, each of you took, yes?
Yeah.
Can you share some of that journey with our audience and maybe some of the scary parts of finding who you are? And I don't care who goes first. Because if you're going to share it with others, people want to know your story too.
Absolutely. I'm a huge proponent I try my best to be an open book because I do really believe that. I think one of the first steps in shifting into this place of authenticity is sharing. And so maybe sometimes I do that a little too openly, but I don't think there's any mistakes. I'll share actually part of what I'm going through right now is something that completely surprised me in how I better know myself, which is a story that has been pervasive in society and the collective for a very, very long time. And I can hear my mother and my grandmother say these words to me. And so, despite remembering that I always thought it was weird words and that why would they say that, it stuck to me. And only through doing lots and lots of layers of work, I now look for these things. Like, that feels weird. Why is that coming up for me? I can't quite understand it. So this kick started because money felt wrong. I couldn't figure out why I was too attached, resisting, not attached. I couldn't understand what was happening for me in that space. And what I realized is that I have a story attached to me that says the only person you can depend on is yourself. And so my mother had her own bank account, even though my father was the sole provider for the family. That was given to her by my grandmother. My grandmother was a rock star in her own right, and also felt she was the only person she could depend on. And so she had her own nest eggs and made her own way. And so as I spent time with that story, understanding where it came from, and also, do I believe it? Do I not believe it? How do I release it? I realized what I have to release is my independence. Woo. This is not an easy task for me to do because my independence has been a big part of my identity my whole life. I've moved from Illinois to New York to Boston. I've been independent. I've done it myself my whole life. And coming back to this concept of community, this is, I believe, a piece that's going to be a quantum leap for me, because as soon as I've identified that, I realized that means I need to learn to actually be held, that I don't have to only depend on me.
Hmm.
And if I can lean into that and start to get comfortable with it, it's going to be a journey. I'm not going to do this overnight by any stretch of the imagination, but just even that awareness in my head makes a big leap for me. Okay, I can do this, giving myself courage. And I personally believe that there's 4 pillars to how you work through these. First is awareness, second is perspective, third is knowledge, and fourth is skills. We like to leap to the skill, but first, the awareness is so important. Just having the awareness makes big shifts in your life. And so this awareness for me allows me to spend more time observing when that comes up for me. Where does it live? And then how do I start shifting my perspective around it? And then building the knowledge. Okay, what do I need to know to actually step into being held? And then I'll practice, probably for the rest of my life, because this is a big one. But that's a little bit about my journey. And I honestly, once you start to move into the space of wanting to get to know yourself, it's almost as if I get excited when something comes up because I'm curious. Ooh, that felt weird. What was that? Let me sit with it and understand it better, because I've seen how transformative it can be. As I talk about this as like my sourdough starter that I still can't make work. Like, things bubble up to the surface and then you feed it, right? And then it bubbles up to the surface and you feed it. And so how can we start to think about that process for ourselves? It's not scary or daunting, but with curiosity. And so my personal experience, though the beginning is rough, once you can move to that place, it's really beautiful to see the leaps that you can make by getting curious about yourself.
I so appreciate your vulnerability. Thank you for opening up. I open the table, I open the floor. Sarah, Marlene, both of you have a story to tell.
Sure. And I'll make the disclaimer that I am still in the messy middle. It's not like I was once blind and now I can see. It's like I was once blind and now I, like, you know, maybe have barely I can see. There's a whole bunch of Vaseline on my glasses or something. So I just keep trying to wipe it off every little bit. But I have forever been a questioner. I always want to know why. And like I said, I was in healthcare for a long time, corporate and regulatory work on the business side of all sorts of different healthcare things. And really for a whole bunch of things happened. But with the universe's assistance, I had a be still and know moment. Basically where it knocked me down and said, you will be still and you will know. Right. And then from that, it was like, okay, now what? And
Wait, literally
I
or
mean, both.
metaphorically?
Like kind of both,
Oh,
honestly.
wow.
There were a couple things that happened over a short series of the month, and then I was like, I can't continue to do this job in a Fortune 6 company. I'm out. And everybody was like, oh, you have to do something. You have to teach yoga. You have to do this. You have to. And I'm like, nope. And so my number one rule during that time, and I still live by it today, is don't do anything that feels heavy. Not that it's not hard, but don't do anything that feels heavy. And your heart knows if it's heavy. And that is difficult at times to like keep coming back to. But that's kind of been one of my main guides. And so I spent a bunch of time talking to people that were super interesting to me and just following that path and moving my body. For me, it's like, I've got to walk, I've got to do yoga. I have to move that energy. And over the course of that time, got really into regenerative health and wellness. What we put in and on our bodies is so important. The soil that it's grown in is even more important. We all need to be soil farmers, working with farmers to transition farms in a different way, thinking like, oh, yes, I can do this. Well, there are a whole bunch of stories that go into that. And farmers have more faith in metal than anybody I know. And they want to do well by us. But if you're in the red, it's really hard to go green. So learned a lot through that journey. And I think part of my conditioning and training as a lawyer, as kind of all these different things in my life, the firstborn child, like you name it, was you will know the answer. And if you don't know the answer, you can go look it up and figure it out. Well, guess what? I knew not all the stuff that was in a bunch of the modules in the journey, but I knew about hydration. I knew about movement. I knew about breathing, right? Because I'd read novels on them. But again, it wasn't till I went in, I had the humility to kind of say, and I can't do it by myself. And I need to connect and I need to play, that it all started to shift around and change. And it's still shifting and changing. And it's super exciting and really scary on some days.
I appreciate you sharing that, both Carrie, Sarah. I know this is a bit tough because you're both going through the journey right now. But I got to ask, Marlene, how is your journey going?
I can certainly, interesting that we do this, but I can certainly tie this up in a bow. So Keith, we've been talking as a society a lot, especially the last 3 years, about mental health, right? And there's so much about how much we all, and we've all, each, the three of us have demonstrated this, how much we all pretend that we're okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I grew up in a family that was not nurturing. I was the oldest child. I very vocal, very sensitive, big emotions that did not go over so well. And so I knew at a very young age, if it was going to be done, I had to do it. So I was consistently told I couldn't do it. And under my breath, I would just say, watch me. And I went out and did it. Right. Okay. Well, that worked. It was a great formula because I did all sorts of amazing things. And I've had this great life. And like everything else, it worked until it didn't. And I was in a process of asking really big questions about relationships in particular, because it was really something that I kept coming up to in coaching individuals. It always went back to how are they going to then be sovereign individuals in a marriage, as a parent, as a lover. And so I wanted to, and I was struggling with it myself. And so I'm in this relationship coach training, and you'll appreciate this. And we're just all kind of unraveling, right? And my epiphany dropped in. And I said, my problem, and it was loud, my problem is that everybody else gets to have what they don't, And I don't, everybody else gets to have what they want, but I don't. And I promise you, you could have heard a pin drop. And my teacher was sitting close to me. She put her knees right up to mine. She put her hands on my knees. She got about 6 inches from my face. And she said, sweetheart, how is anyone supposed to know that you have needs if you are so busy proving that you don't have any? And it was like, whoop. Guess what? Gutted. Yeah, you got my shtick. And so then I could never, there was never the same, right? I had to admit, oh, gasp, I have needs. And that it was in not recognizing my own needs and allowing myself to have them because I got this. Yeah. And it goes back to mental health. We have to be willing to say, I'm not okay. I'm struggling with this. And when we have community, we can show up gutted, crying, grieving, gasping for air, and say, this is what I need, and know that people will respond. And that is a differentiator.
I appreciate that. Carrie?
Oh, it's just, yes, I'm reveling in the fact that we're all firstborn girls.
Of course we
How
are.
did that happen, right?
And it's absolutely spot on. The only thing that I wanted to share is that resonates so deeply with me, and what pushed me to this point in my personal journey is so many things breaking down that I couldn't do alone. And I had to cultivate that relationship with my husband in a different way than I'd ever done before. And I needed to look outside of myself. That was for my career. That was the first impetus for me. Then my daughter got an infection, which led me to the journey. And then my son has had a challenging kindergarten year. And each of those things pushed me further down this path to know myself better, to learn myself better. And I'm so thankful for each of them because I know they were instrumental in me understanding that I had to put down the weight. I had to take it off my shoulders. It's not just mine to bear. And I was resentful of everybody around me for not doing it when all I was doing was keeping it off of everybody else. And so you said that, Marlene, and I'm like, oh my goodness, yes. And I couldn't be more grateful for those big, huge, scary, terrifying lessons that pushed me to know myself better and to heal some of those things. And for me, that looks like, I can't be the only one that's experiencing this. I'm going to go find other people that are. That's just my intrinsic knowledge. And in that experience of then looking back and saying, every time something like this came up and it was hard, I tried to gather people that were experiencing the same hard thing. Isn't that interesting? And that's where it dawned on me that, oh, I build communities. I knew that that was something I did my whole life, but I never recognized it as my own superpower. And one of the things I think we often miss is our own unique superpower that everybody else sees. Everybody. My best friend said to me, you didn't know that? And I was like, I mean, I guess I kind of knew, but I didn't know it. And that's what community can offer you. Reflecting back your superpowers, what makes you you, what makes you awesome, why you need to be here, what you add to the world. And if we don't have those communities that are doing that, holding that space for us, knowing that you can be the best possible version of yourself and doing everything it can to get you to that space, we can't be it. We just can't. And we're in that space of not allowing those reflections to happen for us. And that's isolating. Marlene mentioned mental health. Depression is caused by isolation. Isolation is not caused by depression because we're isolated. We're creating our own world that doesn't exist with anybody else. So we have to step out of that and find people And I just wanted to bring one visual into that space, which is a water wheel. I think of this as the development of community and personal growth. The water is the community, and the wheel is moved by the person coming up, doing their own personal growth, and then offering that back into the community. And that is what makes evolution and the development and the movement happen, is the individual growth fueling the community and moving it along. And that to me is exactly where we need to step into. And if we can actually harness that power and take that first step into that first community, be a little bit more vulnerable, you don't have to jump into the deep end. Just find a space, take one step, take the next step. Maybe that community isn't the right fit for you. You can discern that and you can gracefully walk away and say, this isn't it for me. I need more than this. Okay, now I know more, right? I know more about myself and what I need. And you can keep moving that water wheel along to find the community that's right for you. And I think that it feels overwhelming. It feels huge. It is a whole life journey. And it's really beautiful once you take the first step and find those people that are going to reflect back to you that you are magnificent and we need you and we love you and we want you to love yourself the same way we love you.
Thank you. That was beautiful. And you can cry. It's okay. But before you do, let's end the conversation by giving our audience, we just took our audience on a journey and they all fully appreciated it, because then the three of you became vulnerable, opened up, and shared your pain so that other people can connect with each of you and all three of you. But as part of the Envision Speaker Series, I do ask that those who I speak with leave something of value, leave a to-do item for our audience. As soon as this conversation is over, as soon as we say goodbye, they should be wanting to do something. Please, and let's go in this order. Sarah, Marlene, and then finally Carrie.
All right. Well, I'll say two things. Number one, we talked briefly, mental health and depression. The opposite of depression is expression. So each day when you get up or when you go to bed, think about, how did I express myself today? Whether that's calling a friend, whether that is, my favorite, doing some sort of movement, whether it's art, whether it's dancing around in your kitchen, how did I express myself? And on that same level, what did I do for myself today? And I think, or what am I going to do? And I think if we start with those two questions or end the day with those two questions, it starts to change our world. And if you don't know what to do, I would tell you, get up in the morning, pour yourself a big glass of water, put a pinch of gray Celtic sea salt in it, say infinite love and gratitude to that water, and drink the whole thing down. And as a bonus, if you can, go outside, put your feet on the ground and look at the sun.
Okay. Marlene.
Keith, I would make the invitation. How can you ask for what you need, and who or where is it safe to go in order to do so?
Okay. Thank you. Carrie.
Sure. So meditation has been a really key part in my life and this transformation, spending time with myself. So my encouragement is to see how much time you can spend with yourself in any way, shape, or form, quietly, without noise, without the TV on, without podcast in your ears, without music. Can you walk by yourself? Can you sit in your house by yourself? Start to make tiny movements towards just spending time with you. Because as soon as you start to do that, you start to hear yourself better, and then it will guide you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate this conversation. And for those of you who have been watching and listening, this has been another edition of the Envision Speaker Series, and I'll see you next time. Take care.